All right, we're back with more blueprints, and today we're going over slightly more advanced techniques, and we're going to talk about how to make the manor work for you, and basically how to subvert as many of the basic resources that blueprints asks of you in order to make your runs go smoother, make sure you can fill out more of the castle every single time. So let's get into it. The biggest room to make all this happen is the conservatory. Being able to adjust the rarities of your rooms is game breaking, and we're going to take advantage of being able to break the game in this way. It's very slow, you can only do 3 at a time, so it is going to take some time to actually get all this working, but it all centers around the conservatory and being able to adjust rarity. In fact, when we get to the tier list, we're going to do the tier list based on rarity because I think it's the most efficient way to order everything. But so we have the conservatory to help adjust the rarity of rooms so we can actually see what we want to see. And then we need to figure out what we want to see, okay? And what we want to see are going to be the things that help us get more resources, right? Keys, gold, gems, steps. Those are our 4 main categories. We're going to start with money, though, and our allowance. And the best way to ramp up your allowance is going to be in the laboratory. We're going to want to run experiments every single day, so lab at common for that reason. And we're going to want to really max out our allowance experiments every time that we get the option to do one. So if you have an allowance experiment come up, especially one that has a good hook that you feel like you can get a dozen or so triggers on, that's your day now. Until you've gotten probably at least $100 in allowance, you should really be focusing all your allowance experiments and just focusing your runs on trying to max those out as much as possible, which often requires some kind of a blessing to go with it. Blessing of the Tinkerer is one that can always add, another 5 or 6 on, usually pretty handily. And seeing that we already have lab and security, 2 different mechanical rooms, we want both of these at common, makes the Blessing of the Tinkerer work even better. But there are other ways, like sometimes you want to be doing some digging, so maybe you don't want to put, maybe you're looking for a different outside room if that's the case. But whatever it may be, you want to make sure you're hitting your experiment every day. And then the other thing laboratory does is it lets you have terminal access, and then that lets us remote into security, which ties us into the next resource that we're trying to get around, which is the key card. Right? You're going to need an answer to keycard protected doors, and that can be a utility closet plus security to disable all of them. It could be a break room to make sure that you have a key card every day, or it can be some combination of the two. Maybe you're using break room for the key card, but you probably still want access to security, so that way you can up the number of key card doors, because you may have an experiment that wants you to walk through or access key card doors. So having access to laboratory and security at common means you're twice as likely to see one of them, and either one lets you remote into the other to get your experiment started as soon as possible, which is going to be vital to making everything else here work, is making sure that your experiments are going off, and getting the keycard stuff under lock. Okay, so if that's our cache and our keycard, what do we have next? Next up is going to be our traditional keys and our gems. How do we deal with those? Well, showroom gives us the answers, right? We can get a master key, or we can get an emerald bracelet, or we can get both. It's expensive, but if your allowance is high enough, you could put showroom at common and hope to buy both of these every day. The biggest issue with that is showroom only shows you 4 of the 6 items that you could potentially buy on a given day, so it is possible to roll a showroom with no key, no bracelet, and you don't want to really be in that scenario, because then you have nothing to show. You essentially have to end your day if that's how you planned your route. But we want the showroom anyway, so maybe this isn't a common. This is probably more of an unusual, or maybe standard. Unusuals, though, you are going to be able to dig out with 1 or 2 dice most of the time. So you don't want it at rare. You don't want it buried at rare, where you kind of hope to never see it. We want it at a rarity that it will show up either somewhat or reliably with a couple dice. And then it kind of forks, right? We can go down a bracelet path, or we can go down a master key path. They are going to have some rooms that one wants and the other doesn't. So you do kind of need to make a choice. But I said we're not buying it at the showroom every time. That's because we're going to try and use the coat check instead. And we get one once, and that's why we can put showroom at a higher rarity. We're going to put the coat check at common. So that way, even if it showroom's at unusual, we are going to have the key or the bracelet anyway in the coat check at common. And then if something weird happens where we lose one, or, basically just if we lose one, that showroom isn't out of the question to find, that we can get it back within a day or two. But we do have one more option, right? I said typically we're going to only keep one. There's an option to keep both, and that's going to be with the moon pendant, another showroom item. And how that's going to work is we check one at the coat check, and then we have the second item and the moon pendant, and no other items in our inventory. So how do you do that? You pay a lot of attention. It also means you don't pick up a shovel, so that can be kind of awkward. If you're trying to go off on an experiment that requires you to dig up trash, you're going to need a shovel. So then you're going to need a way to get rid of the shovel. Trading Post is great at that, but it does require you to use up your outdoor room. But if you put a Trading Post outside, you can chain everything down to dice, and dice do not carry between days with the moon pendant. So Trading Post can get rid of everything else. There's also an awkward way to do it with the Lost and Found. Awkward mostly because Lost and Found requires you give up items at random. So you need a showroom and the Lost and Found. You need to already have an item and a coat check. You take item 1, you put it in the coat check. Showroom has to have the other 2 items in stock. You don't buy them. You walk in and out of Lost and Found until you lose everything else, and then you come back and buy the last 2 items at showroom. Now, that is awkward for a couple reasons, because A, the showroom has to have the 2 items that you're missing in stock. You have to have the Lost and Found. You also have to put the Lost and Found in a place where you do not need to backtrack through it, because once you have this set up, you can't lose a random item. You have no random items to lose, to give up. So you can't be forced to backtrack through Lost and Found. So I think the better way is to just assume that you can float one of these and coat check every day. And I think eliminating one of these 2 major resources is enough. Obviously, doing both makes your runs even easier, but I think you can get away with one. I know, in fact, you can get away with one and not need to do anything super special other than, the other things we call out here, to get enough resource to finish on any given day. All right, so we have our keys and our emeralds. What do we do from there? Well, from there, the next best resource, the next thing that you're going to want access to consistently is going to be rerolls. How do we do rerolls? It's going to be dice. Boudoir, I think, is the best. This is the best boudoir upgrade for sure. 2 dice plus the gem that you're getting already off of boudoir. Really solid. The Geist bedroom, I'm gonna tell you to avoid a lot of dead end rooms once we get to the tier list. Geist bedroom, though, I think is worth taking. The dice are just kind of hard to come by, and you want to find your rooms. Finding the rooms that you want is what we're all about here, and getting those dice is going to make that even easier. We also have the cloister, the red cloister. If you get this as an option, great way to earn a whole bunch of dice. And we already talked about a number of dead end rooms that you want to draft anyway. So it kind of looks like downside if you just think, oh, it's a 4-way room, but it shuts off all of our access. It's only a 4-way room in name. And that's true, but it is one of your best resource. You can easily turn this into one of your best ways to get resources. So red cloister, really high value. Of course, you don't see it on every run. We have backup strats for the other green cloisters, but the red one's going to be really good. Other ways to get free rerolls: Observatory. Once you have the ink bottle going, Observatory can give you, even if you just count the 1 free star that you get every day, you can do that, and you get 1 extra reroll, which is fine, but there are, of course, other ways to pump up your star count, and so that way you can waste more. You can also kind of save them up, and if you need them on a given day, blow them on a given day, when you're trying to pull off a particular task, and then just save them up on the other days. Observatory has other upsides that it can get you more keys or more gems. If your money's not online yet, I love that you can take the Observatory and kind of float it right at a spot where you're getting the half off sale every day. Pretty nuts. So lots of good stuff you can do with Observatory. I don't think these two are required to make Observatory good. They're just kind of bonuses that you can get along with it. And again, if you have some dead end synergies or you have next day synergies, Planetarium goes up. The Aquarium, I think you probably are going to have better things to do with your Aquarium, but it's an option. And then the last reroll is maybe the best, really for the Emerald Bracelet runs primarily, but Study. Study lets you spend gems on rerolls, and if you have Emerald Bracelet, that means all of your gems can go to rerolls, which can just be an absolutely insane number. Even if you're not on the bracelet run, you can set up some green runs that with the master key, where you still have an overwhelming amount of gems, and you can still afford to put some number into the study. And that's where having little bits count, right? You get 2 dice in the boudoir, you get 1 or 3 extra hits off your Observatory and Planetarium, and then you get a couple extra hits off the study, and all those together, maybe that's 10 free rerolls that you're getting every run. And that's the kind of thing that you need to put together to have a successful run, right? That's the basic strategy. There's one other little category we're going to go over, and that's going to be some of your highest resource rooms. They also tie into some of the other main strategies that we're doing. So we have the pool with the caveats of it's a drained pool, and you have a pair of trunks here. If you get all of that, it's a 3-exit room, gets you a ton of resources, also gives you access to things like the sauna, the pump room, and the locker room, which can get you even more resources. Sauna, also a tomorrow room for Clock Tower. We'll get to that in a second. Breakfast Nook, I think, is the best Nook upgrade. It gives you access to the morning room, which is 2 gems today, 2 gems tomorrow. And seeing that we're going to put the Nook at common, it means that's 4 gems every day. So that's a key 10 steps and 4 gems. That's absolutely massive amount of resources for only 1 draft room. And then there's the Clock Tower. It's the tomorrow room. You get an additional key for every tomorrow room that you start with. So Clock Tower, morning room, and the coat check. There's 3 right off the bat. That's 3 keys that you can start with. Already great. If you can pick up a couple others, it's going to be even better. But just those 3 to get you rolling is usually enough. We're going to get other keys from other rooms, including the Breakfast Nook. So it doesn't have to be all of your keys. So like actually drafting the sauna is optional, but it is going to be in your pool because we're taking the pool anyway. Mailroom and freezer, these are kind of on the borderline. If you end up tucking them away at rare, I think that's totally reasonable. If you want them for more clock tower synergy, I think that is also fine. All right, one last category to hit up before we go into the tier list, and that's going to be what to do with the armory. Specifically the axe. What rooms do we axe? Well, I think everybody should axe the throne room. It's just costs the most gems. It makes a ton of sense. You want access to it, gives you antechamber access. Lots of good stuff comes from having a throne room. And then next is the cloister. Cloister does what the other two categories of rooms here do in one. So we have our four-way rooms that are options. We have our heavy item rooms, which are options. And then we have cloister, which is a four-way room that gives us items. Depending on which green upgrade, again, if you do the red upgrade costs 0 gems anyway, so we don't need that if that's the case. But if you have any of the green upgrades, putting it to 0 gems, getting a handful of dig spots plus whatever additional resources that you get off of your upgraded cloister is going to be one of the best things that you can do with it. And then your options are, do we spend on items, right? Making a free attic or a free trophy room, getting 8 items or 8 gems, or do we try to axe more four-way rooms and make our navigation that much easier? And I think this is a little bit more nebulous. It goes a little bit more towards playstyle and or your setup at the time. I really like trophy room, especially if you're doing a master key run, but you know, the four-way rooms are also just a totally reasonable thing to have access to at a 0 gem cost. But that is our setup. That's what we're trying to go into every day with, and if we have this, I think all of our resources are generally going to be covered. So now we can go into the tier list and take a look at the individual rooms and get a better sense of where we want the commonality of all of our rooms. All right, let's rank some rooms. Now, there's a lot to do here. Obviously, we've got a lot of rooms to rank. There's some that we're just gonna skip over, and we're not necessarily gonna go in depth on the ones that we've already talked about on the intro. But let's get to it. I have everything broken down by rarity: common, standard, unusual, and rare, and this is going to be based on where we want these rooms to end up. And then there's going to be a couple rooms that are on the Emerald Bracelet track or the Master Key track, and we'll put those separately. But let's dig right in. All right, Foundation we don't need to touch. Here we go. Right from the start, we're getting into lobbing off some of these less useful rooms. Lobbing off the dead ends, right? We want to cut the dead ends because what stops your runs more often than dead ends? Walk-in closet and garage are honestly some of the easiest ones to drop into the rare category. Ideally, we're at a place where we don't really need the small amount of resources. We're really just looking for the rooms that can give us a lot of resources, and the ones that don't give us a lot, we want exits out of. So none of these are a particularly great. Attic, if you cut the cost off, go ahead and put it at standard. If it's at full cost, I think just leave it at rare. Storeroom. Okay, so first upgrade here is the storeroom. You can take the gem or the key. The only bad one is the cash. But it doesn't really matter because we're going to end up putting it in rare anyway. It's a dead end, and it's low value resources. From there, we have the Nook upgrades. So we talked about Breakfast Nook already. I think that is going to be my pick. And I like it at common. We'll put the morning room up there as well for reference. Comes with a morning room. Maybe there's an outside chance that if you're deep on the Emerald Bracelet path, that you don't want the morning room. that you're just going to give up the tomorrow synergy. 4 gems from 1 room, though, is still really good. 4 gems, 1 key, 10 steps is by far better than 2 keys. So I don't even really like this on the Emerald Bracelet. Maybe we even just pull that one off, to be honest. Reading Nook is neat, but it outlives its usefulness at some point. All right, Music Room. Music Room can get you a major key, and because of that, we're going to drop it in Standard. Major key can mean Secret Garden, which means antechamber access. We're going to put a number of ways to access the antechamber on this list at lower rarities. So if there's a particular one that you don't like, you can certainly bump it up to unusual, can kind of change some stuff around, but we're going to start with Music Room at Standard. Locker Room comes off of the pool, so we don't need that. Den's the first one that we're going to drop in Master Key. Even on the Emerald Bracelet run, 1 gem is fine, and a three exit room is also pretty decent. But I could also just see, if you're on an Emerald Bracelet run, that it ends up in unusual. It's not like a high priority, so I'm just going to drop it in the Master Key. I think it makes most sense there. Wine Cellar, though, we could put this in Master Key, but I think you're going to be better off just making your dead ends rare and having less dead ends in your pool. It's 3 gems, sure, but it's 1 less pathway that you have opened, so that's going to stick it in rare for me. Trophy Room, though, that's a lot of gems. If you axe it, you might even just put it at Standard, or maybe even Common, if you're really trying to get your reroll started early, especially alongside something like the Study. But I think we can safely just put it in the Master Key category, and you can figure it out from there. If it's axed, it's going to be real good. You're going to want it all the time. Those 8 gems are going to be phenomenal. If not, you can just stick it at a higher rarity and kind of ignore it. All right, Entrance Hall, we don't need to talk about. Ballroom. Ballroom we can put in Master Key, although there's a possibility that you just put it in rare. If you have an overwhelming amount of resources, this can end up costing you gems more often than it gives you gems. And if that's the case, you just drop it in rare. If you're still in a position where you're filtering through, or you end up spending all your gems, and you can kind of use this to go from 0 back up to 2 just from walking through, it can provide a good number of gems just from running that little gambit. Leave, put down a new room that cost you a couple gems, come back, get 2 more gems for free. It's a nice little hustle, especially once your steps are taken care of. If you don't mind doing a little bit of backtracking, it's worth it for all the gems you can get out of it. Pantry. So rooms that only give cash, cash is the first thing that you should be kind of getting yourself out of. It's one of the easiest things that you can get a large amount of fast via, one good experiment could easily can easily get a dozen or 2 dozen triggers, and the amount that your allowance goes up when that happens starts putting money out of the way of being a resource that you need pretty early. So Pantry looks really bad, plus it's a left turn. One thing, when we have much better access to the commonality and a choice of rooms, the manor is longer than it is wide. So taking turns and encouraging snaking is unwanted. We would much rather be able to make straight lines because it's longer than it is wide. We need to go straight more often than we need to turn. That's really all it comes down to. So Pantry is low value resource and a low value setup with just the 2 exits on a turn. So we just drop it in rare. Rumpus Room. So Rumpus Room is a little bit better because it's a straight pass. The $8 are not going to matter, but I'm more willing to put it at unusual than pantry. Not because it's $8, but because it goes straight through, and that's just going to be a better setup in general. Vault, sometimes you need access to the vault. A lot of times you don't need access to the vault if you found all the keys. If you're still in kind of like that transition point where you every now and then need a big burst of money, you can put it at unusual. 40 gold is a nice chunk. If you're not up to 100 allowance yet, getting a vault could be the difference between buying out a shop and not. So that could be, getting a vault could be all your steps for the day, or it could be just a whole bunch of gems that you can purchase, or basically infinite keys if you have a locksmith. So there's reasons to want vault, but it is a dead end, so we're going to keep it at the unusual tier. Office gives you more access, more terminal access, but again, the money doesn't really matter. Actually, the more important thing with the office is it is a king if you need to reset up your chest set. So that's why we keep office at unusual, so that way if we need to pull it to make the chest set happen, we can. It's not trying to dig something out of rare. The things that are in rare, you really have to dig to find. And so we'll keep this at unusual as something that can show up on a slightly higher frequency. And then we'll count the rooms once we're done, but there's only 45 spots. So if we know we're going to see all the commons and all the standards and most of the unusuals, you got to figure we're going to see, we may see a couple rares as choices, but we're definitely not going to see all the rares, and we're definitely going to place very few rares in our ideal setup. So the things that go into rare, plan on never getting them out, unless you really need to. But if it's something that you think you might need, you should just put it at uncommon. That's why office is here, because you may want to set up the chess set again, pick a new chess piece. All right. Next up is drawing room. Drawing room is still good value. It's got 3 exits. It gets you the gem back that you paid to get in. It essentially spots you 2 dice, letting you re-roll on up to the 2 exits that you have on your way out. So wonderful to see that at standard. We have the study. Study goes right into the emerald bracelet tier. It's still good on master key. But it's like the best thing that you can do if you're on an emerald bracelet route is just being able to get all these free rerolls for these gems that you have laying around. Library, once you've done the library stuff, kind of is not very necessary, so I'm pretty good dropping that at rare. Kind of like the pantry, it's a turn, it encourages snaking. We don't want snaking if we can avoid it. We do want the occasional turn, but we're going to have that covered by the 3-way rooms and some of the commons. And then just some of the better resource rooms that are going to turn anyway. We don't need extra ways to turn. We don't need extra 2-exit rooms. They're just not benefiting us in mastering the manor. Okay, Chamber of Mirrors. So this one's great, and I think you should be checking the Chamber of Mirrors every time that you can. You want to look for good duplicates. There are things that you should be picky about what duplicates you add to your pool. But when you find a good one, it is going to be worth it every time. And they can even help to push your choice of whether you're doing a master key or an emerald bracelet run, whether you're doing bedroom synergy, green room synergy, or hallway synergy. Like let's say you have access to an extra copy of Passageway. Passageway is, or a secret passage, some of the best hallways in the game. If you can add another copy of those, especially if you can like axe the passageway and then start adding copies of it, it can totally change your setup, and you can just go all in on hallways potentially. And so while the conservatory is one of the best ways to change rarities, Chamber of Mirrors is also unique in the way that it lets you potentially add additional copies of rooms to your pool. It also has the ability that it lets you add extra copies on the day of everything. So that's another one that works very well with our experiments. If you have an experiment started that needs you to draft green rooms or red rooms, getting a Chamber of Mirrors and being able to draft 2 copies of all the options in your pool and really make sure that stuff goes off. So you want to see it often. You do need a little bit of access to it, but I think it's fine. It usually ends up working out quite well. Pool, we have it common. We've already talked about pool pretty extensively, I think. Spare room we'll come back to after we do some more of the things that you get to copy with it. Drafting room gets you a straight pass. That's enough for me to put it at unusual, similar to the rumpus room. Right, it's just giving you access to a straight through room, which makes more sense with the shape of the manor. So we don't necessarily need to drop it at rare, although once you have all the rooms, it certainly loses a lot of its value otherwise. But having it at unusual, it's going to show up often enough that it just does its thing. All right, utility closet, another one that we talked about pretty extensively already. Boiler room. It's a 3-way room, and it's a power source. Sometimes you need a power source. So we put it at standard. It's going to be fine. It's going to give you access to the things you want, and you're going to need to pull it on for a number of different things in the game. So you could put it at unusual. I think it's totally fine at standard, though, especially at no gem cost. No gem cost? Does it cost 1? Anyway, let's keep going. We have a pump room, which is another pool. So I don't think we need to talk about that because it only shows up when you take the pool. Security is another one that we talked about already. We throw that up at common. Workshop does a bunch of neat stuff, plus it gives you an item. So rooms that give you items you want to see sooner rather than later. Kind of like what we talked about with attic, right? If you zero out the attic, if you axe the attic, you wanted it standard because you wanted to show up early. Same thing with the workshop, knowing that you have the workshop. The sooner the better. It can get you a shovel or a metal detector, and it can let you turn those into even more useful things. Items that you tend to want early if you want them at all. Plus it's a straight shot through, so we're going to put that at standard. Laboratory, another one that we want at common. We talked about that already. Terminal access is huge. 2 terminals at common, even better. Just double your chances of seeing it sooner. The sooner the better for your experiments. Sauna, we talked about. We're not going to rank because it comes with the pool. Coat check. Coat check at common. Right, and our commons are almost filled out. We want to keep our commons as shallow as possible so we can see as many of them as soon as possible, get as many of them out in the early ranks. So we're going to leave a lot of those at common. Mailroom, I already mentioned, is one that, it's a tomorrow room, so there's some little synergies that you have going on. As far as actually getting your mail, kind of whatever. I like to take the no contact as an upgrade and put it into unusual, and that way you don't need it to show up every day, which is kind of what the unusual category is, more of an every other day sort of room, which no contact delivery lets you pull off. The other ones are okay, and if you like one of the other mail rooms, I think it's fine. I also think it's totally reasonable to just put it at rare with the rest of your dead ends and just give up on the mail room, especially if you've already done all the puzzle related stuff. If you still need the mail room as a reference, though, you definitely want to keep it at unusual. You don't want to have to try to dig out something from rare. You can dig something out of unusual with a couple dice. Rare is going to be much harder to actually pull out. Rotunda. Rotunda is a 4-way room. If you make it free, you can go ahead and put it at standard. If you don't make it free, I like it at unusual. It has a couple awkward quirks to it, being a 4-way room that you can't necessarily you have to backtrack through, and can't loop around and come in the other side unless you prepare it ahead of time. So it's just a little weird and awkward to use and expensive. If you took the gems off, though, you can certainly lower it, but I think my preference would be either vestibule or passageway, just because the rotunda's more awkward, even though you save more gems by axing the rotunda. Alright. Next up is the freezer. Freezer is another dead end. If your money and your gems are on point, you should never actually need the benefits of the freezer. And if you've done the story-related things, if you've unfrozen the freezer already, you should not need to access it again. If you still do, you put it at unusual. If you're done with it, you just drop it at rare and continue on. Dining room. Dining room is one of our best ways to get steps. It's also a 3-exit room, so we put that at standard. We want to see it all the time. Even getting it fairly early is fine once you get all your upgrades, your mail, your lunch crate. You can pick that up early anyway, so it's good wherever. Observatory, also good wherever. Totally fine putting this at standard. We want to see it, and the earlier the better. If we're trying to get resources out of it, you want it early. If you're trying to, whatever the resources, whether it's keys, whether it's getting the sale, the earlier the better. So I could even potentially see standard common over standard, but again, we want to keep our commons as tight as possible, so I think standard's a totally reasonable place to end up on that. Same thing with conference room. It's a 3-way exit. Got a little bit of upside. We want to see it basically every run. So we drop it at standard. We've got aquarium upgrades. My favorite being electric eel. All the good stuff that you already know about aquarium. Plus, it's a mechanical room for our mechanarium and or for our experiments. It's also a power source if you ever need a power source. And this way, you have 2 power sources, the common boiler room and the aquarium. Aquarium is also something that you can add extra copies of, which means you can add extra mechanical rooms. So lots of good synergies. I like having it at standard. Your backup, of course, being the starfish aquarium, but I think the opportunities for that are less than the electric eel. I think that's just going to be better overall. All right, parlor upgrades. So funeral parlor is the best. Again, it's a little awkward though. You kind of want your gems early, but funeral parlor you want to draft later, so you do need a good number of red rooms to go with it. But hey, extra gems are great. I don't know that I would really fault you for any of the parlor upgrades. I think there is diminishing returns on the funeral parlor. You're going to get to a point where you really just don't need an excessive amount of gems, because you're getting enough gems from other ways. Especially if you have like a trophy room. Like you can, if you axe a trophy room and put it at common or standard, That is such a massive influx. It's basically, a funeral parlor at no cost, no downside. And you can take it early. You can put it at common and draft it at the beginning of your day instead of funeral parlor, which you're gonna have to wait to the mid game to actually get anything out of. So that actually makes the parlor upgrades a little bit more equal. If you're okay doing the games, you can go for the increased prize. If you're just going for ease of use, which I'm not going to fault you, if you want to take 2 wind-up keys and basic addition out of the speakeasy, totally reasonable way to play the game, especially if that's the sort of thing that is keeping you from having fun. It is missing out on like some of the basic resources. Certainly not going to fault anyone who goes on that path for the parlor or for the break room on that matter. We did talk about the reasons why you would want the break room particular at common. We didn't get into the other ones though. So speakeasy, it gets you a couple extra keys. Totally reasonable with your emerald bracelet. If you're not already using the break room, that is. And then there's the pool hall if you're doing hallway strategy, any kind of hallway shenanigans. You could definitely go with the pool hall instead. Just a little bit more flexibility there. Any way that you end up, I think it's probably going to be at standard, though, if you do one of these. Break room, you want it common. The other ones are fine at standard. Gallery gets you gems. I think we could probably safely put gallery in standard, though. It gets you gems and a little bit of cash, so there's an argument to put it in the master key category. But it's free and it's a pass-through, so I think it's going to be good even if you're emerald braceleting. You can still spend those gems on your study upgrades anyway. And then room 8 comes with it, but that's got its own quirks and not a whole lot to do in room 8, to be honest. So next up, closet. You know what? There's upgrades to closet, but you were just tucking it in rare. It's a dead end and it provides very little for us anyway. So we just tuck those away at rare. It doesn't really matter what upgrade you get. There is the where is it? The cloister. And trying to get the red empty closet off of the cloister is a combo. But you'd have to see the cloister first before you saw the closet upgrade. I think bedroom closet's probably the worst upgrade because your bedrooms tend to have the least amount of doors coming off of them. At least the hallway closet, your hallways tend to be 3 and 4 way exits, 3 and 4 exit rooms. But I think for most scenarios, you're just going to dump it at rare anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Bedroom, bedroom, I'm going to put it rare. It just doesn't do enough, and again, it's the left turn problem that Pantry and Library have that we're trying to avoid snaking if possible. So we just dump it at rare. Boudoir's got a couple of upgrades. We talked about the dice upgrade. It's my favorite. I put it at common. You want dice early because you need a couple of dice to roll the outside room. So the sooner the boudoir shows up, the sooner you can set your outside room, which lets you set up the rest of your day, whether that's your experiment or whatever it is that you need to put outside. Boudoir makes it all possible. So the other upgrade's just not worth it. Geist bedroom. Geist bedroom is my upgrade of choice. I put it at standard. Again, it's another way to get some more free rolls. Yeah, I like it over the other ones. Nursery. So if you're on a master key run and we're trying for some gem heavy stuff, I could see taking an indoor nursery. For everything else though, I'm pretty sure you just drop nursery at rare. If you're going deep on bedroom synergy, obviously you'll take one of the upgrades. And there's some combos with each, but I don't think they're necessary. Steps are, after you get your gold online, I think steps are one of the easiest ones to handle. You have the dining room with, so once you have lunch and dinner set up, that kind of takes care of a lot of the steps that you need, plus the steps that you get just as a natural upgrade. From playing, you should be upping, getting more steps than the ones you start with. So steps kind of fade away pretty quickly to the point where I don't think you actually need the nursery upgrades, and that's why we can drop it at rare. Servants' quarters. So this is an emerald bracelet one, and a reason that you might actually want some of these bedrooms outside of somewhere other than rare. If you are doing the bedroom synergy, servant quarters is going to get you a bunch of keys, and that's emerald bracelet territory. There's the bunk room. Bunk room's another one that we're just going to drop it rare and not even really think about the upgrades. If you do have to upgrade it, I mean, the cash is worse, but keys or gems are just going to be emerald bracelet versus master key. That's just that same argument again. Her ladyship chamber, one of the few queens that you can get, and we do want access to our chess pieces. I mentioned it on Office that we can get a king here. Ladyship chamber gets a queen, so we do want it in our pool, so we'll put it at unusual. The fact that it's hard to draft, though, it's possible that you can even put it at standard because it doesn't show up all the time. But I usually don't want the dead end to show up all that often anyway, so I'm okay wasting a couple dice. And we do want to make sure we do want to keep our standard and commons fairly tight. And we are going to end up with a lot of standard rooms. There's still a lot of these that are going to end up in standard to come. So we will tuck that away in unusual for now. Master bedroom. Again, steps are one of the first things that you kind of get past. So we can just tuck that away at rare. Planetarium. Planetarium, we drop in unusual. You don't want it really till the end of the run. Taking it early doesn't do a ton. And, we talked about reasons that you may even want to just tuck it at rare. It's a dead end. There is some stuff going on here, though, and 2 extra stars, those are 2 extra rerolls. So maybe you could say it's more of a master key thing. Since we don't have access, or we don't have as good of access to the study, Planetarium giving us 2 extra rerolls is still not as good as study, but the rerolls are important, so you're going to need them. That's why I tuck it away at unusual, and you see it every other run, maybe. Or if you're just looking for the last room to place for your day, you just spend the rest of your dice to try to pull up a planetarium, and that's going to give you a couple extra rerolls tomorrow. Okay, Mechanarium. So the Mechanarium, it's a 4-way room. It's antechamber access, so it's got a lot of stuff, a lot of good things going for it. Where did I put this? So here's the thing. We have a lot of mechanical synergies already, right? We have utility closet and security at common, along with laboratory at common, and then the aquarium, boiler room, workshop. There's just so many mechanical rooms that we already want to draft that it's very easy to get a lot of value out of the Mechanarium. So I put it at standard. It's gonna usually be at least a three-way room, probably give us antechamber access and maybe some items even if we are really going off. So lots of good stuff that we can do with that one. Treasure trove. You know, if your money's not online yet, treasure trove can look pretty good. But I feel like money is something that's fairly easy to overcome. So this one could actually bounce around quite a bit, and I could even see dropping it at rare if your money's really, if you've really got that allowance setup happening. But it's also fine at unusual. This one kind of like hovers between the two. To be honest, it really depends on, you know, when you get the opportunity to change the rarity on this, you'll know where you want it, because either you're still accumulating a lot of allowance and you want this slightly higher so that way you can see it, or you've got your allowance all locked up and you never want to see it again. Throne room. Okay, throne room's a great one. Throne room you want pretty easy access to, and assuming you axed it, it can come down whenever. And it's a three-way room, so I can easily see this at standard. It doesn't give you resources, which, you know, a lot of our standard rooms we do want to get something back from, and in fact if you look at all of them so far, outside of like boiler room, even though that does give us access to some other stuff, everything else gives us some kind of a payoff. So I could put throne room at uncommon, but there's diminishing returns to your antechamber access, right? You don't need access to every side of the antechamber every round. So like if you put Mechanarium here over throne room, I think that's totally reasonable. If you swap those, or if you swap one of the other antechamber access rooms, there's a little bit of play there. So I think you just don't want to flood yourself on antechamber access, especially if it's costing you gems still. But you don't want to go past unusual. You definitely don't want to put throne room at rare. You want to see it often enough that you want to keep it in the unusual tier so you can roll it when you need it. All right, tunnel. Love me a tunnel. You know, one of the best things that you can do is to go straight. The manor's longer than it is wide, so there are lots of good reasons where you might want a number of straight paths in a row. So we just drop it at standard. Okay. Conservatory. Now, I've never actually seen the conservatory show up as an option to change in the conservatory. I'm not ruling it out, but it could also be something that's hard-coded. Not actually sure. If you know, let me know in the comments. But if I could change it, it would be at common, just so we can knock it out more frequently. Even if it's not, you still want to find it every time. So we're going to put it in the common tier. Next up is the closed exhibit. Security doors. You may have some want for more security doors and or for other things in the closed exhibit. So we will put it at unusual, so it is in the kind of broader realm of things we have access to. But we probably don't want access all that often. Same thing with lost and found. Sometimes you want a lost and found, not very often though. But I think it's often enough. There are enough scenarios that come up that you would want it in unusual and not buried in rare. Because rare truly is buried for how we're doing things here. Okay, terrace. Getting into the green rooms, this one sucks. Green rooms don't cost gems to draft. It's a dead end though, and we're trying to minimize how many dead ends we have. Patio. Patio goes with our master key. It's a good way to get a bunch of gems. Works with all of our green room synergies, and again, we already want to see conservatory and morning room, and we have aquarium at standard. So lots of green rooms that are going to be showing up anyway. Patio is just going to make sure that we can keep that going. Courtyard, we've got courtyard upgrades. So if you're doing Master Key, you just slam double gem. If you're doing Emerald Bracelet, I think you just slam Courtyard. And essentially spotting you a key and spotting you the gems are pretty sweet. Not much else to say about these. The 5 dig spots, like there are times where the dig spots are nice, but I think you'd rather just the consistency of one or the other, either skipping out on keys or farming additional gems. And it can have items, a great place to help find a shovel. So they do end up in standard, but the choice, I believe, just comes down to whether you're trying to bracelet or Master Key. The cloisters. So red cloister is going to be the best, right? And we would put that at standard. The other cloisters are also very good, and if you can axe them, they should be at common. And if you don't axe them, you might still want them at standard, maybe. You get a lot of resources out of them, and they all have pretty good effects. Especially the permanent ones, Personally, I like Cloister of Joya. It's a unique effect in the grand scheme of things. There are other ways to run up your allowance, even though Cloister of Lydia does do it pretty effectively. There's not a ton that let you manipulate steps in this way. So Cloister of Joya is cool, but the red one, of course, is going to be the top tier. Veranda, greater chance of finding items in green rooms. This kind of goes with the rest of the green synergy. It's also a room that gives you straight passage on a 2-exit room. Very nice. Greenhouse, though. Greenhouse kind of sucks, right? It's okay. Greenhouse, I put at unusual. It's, again, back on cloister access, not cloister, antechamber access. You just want to kind of balance these out a little bit. If you find yourself on green strategies more, maybe you move greenhouse up and move some of the other ones down. They're going to be a little bit more tied to preference, really. Like, obviously, Throne Room having the 3 exits and Mechanarium having more exits are going to be better than Greenhouse. But it's green, and sometimes, if you're doing a green thing, green's going to be better. All right, Secret Garden, you need the key, so we're not going to rank that one. Hallway upgrades. Lock Trunk is always better than a key. Lock Trunk is valued at maybe like 2 keys. So there is very little reason to take anything other than the Lock Trunk. Now, there's a possibility that you get offered this as one of your early upgrade choices before you've gotten any of your other keys going. And if that's the case, and this is like the first key that you get, this is a fine upgrade, just taking the single key. But if we're talking long game, it's going to be the trunk, and we are also going to put it at standard. It's just a good room. And then there's the option, of course, for a Tomorrow room. So if you're heavy on Tomorrow room or heavy on like hallway into hallway strategies, I can't fault you for taking the Tomorrow hallway, but generally I think you're better off just getting more resources out of it, because it's a room that you want to draft anyway. Even if you take the Tomorrow hallway, it doesn't get any higher than standard, right? And so I think the resources are good enough for me in that case. East Wing and West Wing halls will also just drop at standard. They're just good to have every time. Same with the corridor. I said standard was going to start to balloon up, right? And here we go. Standard's just getting all these rooms. Passageway, Another one that we want in standard. You want to see it all the time. Secret passageway. I love a secret passageway, especially when you're trying to pull out maybe something that you have tucked away at uncommon. Their secret passageway can go pretty far at making that happen. Foyer. Sorry, my bad. The foyer we can drop in the Emerald Bracelet tier. Unlocking all your hallways, obviously that has synergy. It's going to be just a ton less keys that you need to bring with you. Yeah. Good stuff. Great Hall. Another 4-way room. Better on the master key run, of course, but if you have the foyer, it's going to be just as good. And worst case, it's just another 4-exit room, which we're putting all those in standard for the most part. So I think we just drop it in standard and feel pretty good about it. All right, red rooms. So we've got lavatory. It's a dead end. It goes in rare. Maid's chamber, another one that we just drop right into rare. No reason to draft a maid's chamber. Archives, pretty bad. And weight room. Now weight room does give antechamber access, so there's like outside reasons that you might want the weight room, but lose half your steps is pretty significant. So I think you're better off just dropping it at rare. Same with the furnace, and same with the dark room. Even though we're taking the utility closet very highly, I don't think it's worth it to backtrack just to make dark room into, like any of these other three-way rooms. Before you have everything popping off, like dark room it's still a 3-way room. So it definitely has its uses, but once you start to get the standard tier tuned in, your need for darkroom as a 3-way room goes down significantly. And yeah, you're just not going to need it. All right, chapel. Chapel, though, you know what? You should be making so much money that you don't even notice the chapel. And it's basically going to work just like any of these other 3-exit rooms. Same thing for gymnasium. You, while half of your steps is significant, 2 steps is not. Plus, we're potentially drafting utility closet. It's possible that this is just off and it's a free 3-way room. Okay, that's all the hallways, outside rooms. Let's do the shops. Love me some shopping. Now, if your allowance is high enough, you should be able to buy out basically any 2 shops that you want as soon as you start your day. And commissary often has gems and can have some other items that you may just want anyway. If it doesn't have gems, it probably has a shovel or a metal detector that's going to help you find more resources. It is a 2-exit room. It turns left, so it does encourage snaking, which is not ideal, but it is enough resources that it doesn't matter. Same thing with kitchen. Once your income is high enough, you can just buy out the kitchen every time. It costs like $50 maybe, and it gets you an absolute ton of steps. So we basically want to see it every time. Locksmith. We'll drop locksmith in the Emerald Bracelet, but you can get specialty keys, major keys out of the locksmith. And so Emerald Bracelet, maybe you wanted it standard. Master Key, I think you probably still put it at unusual. I think there's going to be just enough opportunities to pick it up that you may want it. But definitely for the Emerald Bracelet runs. Bookshop is linked to the library, so we're not going to rank it. Armory we talked about Armory. You definitely want to get your 3 axe uses. After that, I don't really care about the armory. I guess you could put it at unusual. Um, the thing with armory, though, and the thing with the shops, is if you have a secret passage or we talk about Chamber of Mirrors, another great one to get a second copy of that you should be looking for, in my opinion, is Secret Passage. There are so few shops, kind of like putting a room outside that you just need a couple of dice to guarantee whatever outside room. If you have a secret passage and a couple dice, you can essentially get whatever shop you want. So the rarity of the shops, the ones you want to see often, you put in standard. Everything else you can kind of tuck away at rare. As long as you have access to secret passage, because secret passage and a couple dice should be able to pull up the rest. And once you used up your 3 axes, I'm fine tucking it away at rare. The other items are mostly replaceable, so I don't really care about finding it. If you're trying to roll for it naturally and you don't have a second secret passage, or you're just like some of the items here, you could put it on unusual and find it a decent amount of the time. And then there's the gift shop, which is just another three exit room, kind of in line with the chapel and the gymnasium. You don't necessarily need what you're getting out of it except for the exits, but that's good enough. It lets you stay very open. Okay. Last stretch of rooms here are the optional rooms. I'll go ahead and I'll rank all of them in case you unlocked all of them in order to get the trophy. So Dovecote is actually pretty good. It is a 2 exit room, but it lets you rotate your other 2 exit rooms. And then the goal with the Dovecote is to not pick it when it shows up. You just use it for its ability and then leave it in the pool, and that way you can roll it again later. And when it shows up again, you get to use its ability again. So Dovecote's cool for that. Vestibule is also awesome because it's a 4 exit room and we want to maximize those. Classroom, once you've done the thing, you can put it at rare. Solarium, actually terrible based on what we're doing here, because we're putting all of our good rooms at common and standard, and then the rooms that we don't want to see, we're putting at unusual and rare. So we want to tuck Solarium away at rare once we have everything set up. Clock Tower. Clock Towers are tomorrow room synergies. This is another room that we're going to put in standard. Love to see it. Casino, I don't really care about Casino. I guess if you're still struggling with cash, you don't need to put it at rare right away. And you get a little bit of money when you come in. You could potentially roll and double up your cash. So it has a couple uses early, but as you push on, I think it's fine to just drop it at rare. Dormitory, another one, pretty free to drop at rare. Kennel is another one that we can drop at standard. It's a pass-through and gives you a couple extra bonuses along the way. Okay. Is that all the shops? Oh, there's laundry room. So if you're heavily skewed towards one resource, I could see putting laundry room at standard. And, if it's the sort of thing that you're trying to do with some frequency, I could also see just dropping it at rare if you're a little bit more balanced and don't feel that you need it. I kind of like to leave it at unusual. You can pull it out if you need it. And if you don't, it mostly doesn't show up. Oh, and then showroom. Showroom is another pass-through. And we've already talked about the myriad of things that you might want to buy at showroom, so we'll put that at standard. And I think that about does it. We've got the outside rooms, but those are a lot more specific to what you're doing on any particular day. If I was going to rank them, I definitely... Shrine. Shrine is one of the most used ones, even though you don't necessarily need to pull it every day. If you have something that you're trying to do a shrine, you can set it up for 7 days in a row, and then you can just pull other stuff in the meanwhile. Hovel's great early in the game, but at this point, you know, if you have this whole setup going, you're basically never going to need Hovel again. Tool Shed can get you some interesting stuff early. Schoolhouse, hopefully you only ever use once. Shelter gives you terminal access. But you should know all this stuff by now. Root Cellar, again, if you have an experiment that wants you to dig, maybe Root Cellar is better than the Shrine. Yeah, but I think that's about it. I think we'll stop here, put the full list up on screen. And, you know, this should let you get through. This should let you basically dodge all the major resources, give you close to everything that you could need to get through. And then from here, you're free to do whatever you want for the puzzles, you know. This is going to let you fill out your castle. I have done this a couple times, and I can tell you that once you've got a good chunk of this going, you should be able to put down 40 plus rooms every day, without question. Now, maybe they're not necessarily the exact rooms that you want, but just being able to fill it out means you get further down into your build. And can we give a quick count here? So that's 10, 20, 30, and another 42, 44. So that's 44 rooms between common and standard. And if you draft all of those, you have room for one other unusual or rare to show up, and that's not including the ones that you want for your Emerald Bracelet or Master Key runs in particular. And so hopefully that gives a little bit more perspective as to what you're going to end up with on any given day. It's going to be all the commons, all the standards, or, you know, all the commons, most of the standards, maybe a couple unusuals that you went out of the way to find, and then whatever bracelet or key specific things that you needed. But this should give you access to whatever you need. It should give you access to a full chest set if you need to do that, plus whatever kind of end game antechamber access sort of things that you need. So I hope that was helpful, and maybe we'll do one kind of show this off in a run if you want to see what it looks like once you have some more of this set up. And then, yeah, I guess the only other thing would be some of the challenge runs. I'm still trying to put together a day one strategy video, but it's tricky. It's in the works though. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you want to see, any other specific types of runs or thoughts that you have. I'd love the feedback. But yeah, go out there, conquer your manor, and I don't have an intro plan. I'm just going to say goodbye now. Bye.